Hello, geeks, freaks, and all those unique. This is Emcee Frodis. I have been a Doctor Who fan for a long time now. I was introduced to the series when I was a kid because my mom had a big crush on Peter Davison. But I didn't become passionate about the series until David Tennant's run. That being said, Matt Smith is who I think of as my Doctor. But every time David Tennant steps back into the TARDIS, you have my attention. To get this out of the way, there are spoilers for all three of David Tennant's 14th Doctor specials in this, so warning in advance. I'm not going to do full reviews of these specials. I enjoyed all three of them, but had things I would change in all of them. I don't think I can say much more than that on the actual quality of them, but there is so much more to say about what happened and how this will impact the Whoniverse going forward. These specials represent a rebirth of Doctor Who. Russell T Davies is returning to helm the show he revived 18 years ago. The thing I'm really getting from this is how we're resetting the status quo. While regenerations have always, unsurprisingly, been about renewal, even with the change in actors, the Doctor has been carrying around a lot of baggage acquired in those 18 years. I say those years in particular because the classic series didn't delve into the psychological ramifications of everything that happened to the Doctor. The only time I can really think of something having a lasting impact was Five remembering Adric 2 years after he died. Something with both 14 and 15 actually brought up in the third special, so yeah, that little jerk really affected them. The lack of psychological impact the Doctor's adventures had on them completely changed with the revival. In episode 2 of Christopher Eccleston's season, The End of the World, we're told how the Doctor is the last of the Time Lords. This revival would also have the Doctor's companions largely suffer horrific fates instead of leaving the TARDIS voluntarily. Each parting deeply hurt the Doctor. Even when the Doctor's companion did leave voluntarily, completely intact, as was the case for Martha Jones, it still had a psychological effect on the Doctor. It is repeatedly shown that the Doctor can't be alone, not because they want to show the universe to someone, but because the Doctor doesn't want to be alone with the person they hate most in the universe. Forget the Daleks, the Master, and the Cybermen. The modern Doctor's worst enemy has always been themselves. Over the years, things have just kept getting worse and worse. We started with the Doctor's guilt over being the only survivor of the Time War, but once more Time Lords were revealed, that just caused more grief for the Doctor. Then they're obliterated once again. The final tipping point in all of this was the Flux and the revelation of the Timeless Child. We see in these specials that this has destroyed him beyond what he can run away from. Such a psychological burden is really too much for any one character to carry. The Doctor has literally billions of years of trauma. This is not a character who can carry on the way they were and still be entertaining to the fans. We've seen this cycle repeated over and over again, the Doctor simply running away from their trauma, and then it just happens again. This eventually becomes very unpleasant for the viewers. And it's also just a bad lesson for the audience that you should repress your trauma and pretend it's not there. But how do you solve a problem like the Doctor? Russell T Davies is the one who started us down the path of the lonely god, so he's going to take a stab at course correcting. This is not to say that Stephen Moffat and Chris Chibnall were wrong in what they did with the Doctor. These are a bunch of Doctor Who fanboys who are all friends with each other, who wanted to make their mark on the Doctor and carried on from what Davies had already put into place. Everyone had their high points and their low points, and it's time for a fresh start. But Doctor Who is not a show that needs a complete reboot. It has a lot of fail-safes put into place, where you can keep the rich history while also getting a fresh start. Davies has already done this once with Rose, and now he's doing it again with the Bi-Generation. There has obviously been a lot of speculation as to why David Tennant was brought back to play the 14th Doctor, aside from his massive popularity as the Doctor. I think we've now gotten the answer, and it's threefold. First, bringing Tennant back shakes up the status quo. The revival regenerations have a set pattern. The Doctor is fatally injured at the end of their final episode, ends up regenerating, and ends off on a quip and a cliffhanger before we get into the new regeneration in the next series. But there's nothing shocking because the next Doctor is long announced by that time. But with the 14th Doctor, we were surprised. While the audience knew David Tennant was getting some specials, we didn't know it wasn't going to be set during the 10th Doctor's era. There was an actual surprise that it wasn't Ncuti Gatwa appearing immediately after Jodie Whittaker. There is also the issue of let's not call it a reboot. Let's call it a reset. We're resetting the Doctor to not be carrying this massive psychological weight upon them. And the 14th Doctor is serving as that reset. It wouldn't be fair to bring someone in solely to play this interim Doctor. But David Tennant already had his iconic run, so giving him a short run now doesn't feel unfair to the actor. It's also fitting because of all of the Doctors, David Tennant is the one who always felt the most emotionality in the decisions he made. The moment called the 10th Doctor, the man who regrets. So when it comes to an incarnation that is going to take the time to properly heal, yeah, it makes sense to be him. I really like that Ncuti Gatwa gets to go into his season of Doctor Who with a clean slate, getting back to the lighthearted adventures without this cloud hanging over him. And then there are just the hanging threads. The audience has long wondered if Donna would ever get her memories back, and Davies finally wanted to get that out of the way. But the only way it feels really emotionally impactful is if it's with her version of the Doctor. Yes, the 14th Doctor is slightly different than the 10th, but not really all that much. I know a lot of jokes have been made in the fandom about Russell T Davies having a penchant for using regeneration to make an extra David Tennant to give to his favorite companions. Which, fair cop. But I do like that the Doctor doesn't do rehab in order. That 15 is okay because 14 will take the time he needs to recover. It is the kind of timey-wimey stuff we expect from Doctor Who, and it fits with this fresh start the show is getting going into what is now Series 1. There are a lot of questions that come with the bi-generation, though. We have a Doctor and a TARDIS just chilling on Earth now. He is obviously not opposed to going out on small trips, even if he's mostly retired. But I find it hard to believe, even in retirement, that 14 would not get involved with earth-shattering events. Maybe there could be a couple of ways around this. Maybe the Doctor isn't going to have too many adventures in modern-day London. I do find that somewhat likely. Modern-day London is cost-effective for the production team. Maybe 14 will constantly find himself in Peru, like the Brigadier did during the last few years of his time with UNIT. Or just throwing this out there. Maybe David Tennant is feeling a bit nostalgic and wants to have an easy way to breeze back into Doctor Who for an episode and then slip out without being beholden to an entire series. Without also the heady implications of multi-Doctor stories involving the crossing of timelines. I think this is more likely given the obvious spin-offs that are being set up. Do I think this cheapens Ncuti Gatwa's run as the Doctor and possibly future regenerations? Probably not. The episode makes it perfectly clear that the 15th Doctor is the current incarnation of the Doctor. He is the one we will be following, and regardless of whether or not we have other potential Doctors around, he is the one the show will focus on. No matter what, even if it had been a regular regeneration, there would be some fans who bitch and moan about how David Tennant should be the only Doctor. But Doctor Who, as a program, has Ncuti Gatwa as the main character. Whatever exists in the universe doesn't impact what is going to happen on the show itself. As for the other Whoniverse programs that are coming up, that's another story. I think David Tennant is really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of appearances from Doctors other than the currently reigning one. This is because of what Davies revealed in the commentary of this episode. According to him, the bi-generation actually rippled through all of the Doctors. Every single Doctor we have previously seen at the moment of their regeneration ended up splitting into two Doctors, leaving the previous one still alive. We just remember it differently because timey-wimey. As David Tennant pointed out, this means there are actually 3 versions of himself as the Doctor running around, with the Meta-Crisis Doctor in Pete's World with Rose, 14 with Donna, and 10 who knows where. Personally, I hope he went and had more adventures with Martha, treating her like she always deserved and saving her from her flop husband. With this, it's not just David Tennant who now has the potential to show up in Doctor Who or its spin-offs. It's every single surviving Doctor. In the past years, Doctor Who has been finding a lot of ways to work in the classic actors, despite all of them having visibly aged since their tenures, such as their appearances in Power of the Doctor, or even going all the way back to Peter Davison in Time Crash. By using the bi-generation across all of the Doctor's existence, we no longer need to find handwaves to bring in these actors, like was done in the aforementioned episodes. Any Doctor can now appear as they look now, and who cares that they don't appear as the age they did when they regenerated, because the toy maker fractured the Doctor's timeline and put it together incorrectly. We've already seen this in Tales of the TARDIS, which repackaged classic episodes of Doctor Who with bookends featuring aged versions of the 5th, 6th, and 7th Doctors. There is now a freedom to utilize these Doctors in stories. It's not a requirement, but it's nice to have it as an option. And I think various actors are up for the chance, as long as it's not for an extended period, but rather as a one-off episode. Since School Reunion, Doctor Who has been amping up the presence of classic companions. This came to a head in The Power of the Doctor, where we had a cavalcade of appearances. I don't think this is going to slow down in the wake of Doctor Who being spun off into new shows. It would not surprise me in the least if we're moving towards an anthology series, where we get to see previous Doctors and companions going on adventures to save the world. Do I like this idea? Again, I'll speak with a little bit of ambivalence, but mostly yes. I love when old companions come back. And it's not like we haven't had previous companions with shows about saving the world. It's just previous ones had a specific focus on one companion, like Jack Harkness and Sarah Jane Smith. But will bringing previous Doctors back cheapen the multi-Doctor stories? I don't think so. Or maybe it does, and I just don't care. I firmly believe that Davies is not going to let anyone take anything away from Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor. And I think the appearances from other Doctors will mostly be relegated to spin-offs. And I don't think we're going to be getting an appearance by the Doctor in every single episode of every single spin-off. I think Davies is just putting a wedge in the door, so no time is needed to be devoted to explaining why the Doctor has come back aged further than they should be, and apparently outside of their own timeline, which is frankly a concept which never really made much sense in a show about time travel, outside of explaining away why the Doctor didn't run into themselves more often. So I've really just begun scratching the surface of all of the implications of the bi-generation, because I think the show has just begun scratching the surface. Davies loves lore. While we've dispensed of things like the Great Time War because of how depressing it is, something like the bi-generation is a joyful development. It is a way to celebrate Doctor Who in all of its incarnations. I don't think the fact we can bring back any Doctor now will affect Gatwa's run, because I don't think they'll often bring back former Doctors. I think they just have an easier way to do it, while not having to worry about the fact that aging is a thing. We honestly know so little about the new run of Doctor Who and what is going to happen to the Whoniverse that I can't go over all of the possibilities. But I'm going to enjoy the fact that for once the regeneration was a completely happy ending, instead of something that was, at best, bittersweet. So tell me your thoughts below on the Doctor Who specials and the bi-generation. If you like my videos, subscribe to my channel. I do videos about Buffy, Doctor Who, Marvel, Star Trek, Star Wars, and lots of other geeky things. Also, if you like my Star Trek content, please check out Strange New Pod. We go live Thursday nights at 9:30 Eastern on YouTube. If you want to support me, please visit my Patreon. You can also buy me a coffee. You can find me on all platforms as well as most social media as Emcee Frodis. So until next time, live long, and may the Force be with you.